Jaehwan is confused as he wakes up being told he ate someone. Meanwhile, the blue-haired woman is nagging him to do something about this. In the end, she approaches him as she puts her hand on his shoulder asking him to save someone, the only believer she has left. Outside Jaehwan's mind in the Forbidden Zone, a white-haired man is carrying Jaehwan's naked body as he runs away from a group of unknown people. All he knows so far is that after he tries to look for the god he worships, there are people who are hiding in the forest that are now chasing him and demanding he hand over the naked guy. He is extremely confused as to why this is happening when his god, Anderson, isn't responding. Unfortunately, before he can even get away, he meets a dead end of a cliff. The assailant immediately surrounds him as he expresses his delight to finally catch up to him. He repeats his demand to hand over the naked guy, while the white-haired man immediately recognizes who they are. It's Berghane Scythe, the follower of Berghane. He is a mid-level god, known as the God of Scythes. The white-haired man knows he changed sites to Caspian, but he didn't think he would be here in the Forbidden Bluegrass Zone. So he claims that the naked man belongs to him and his god. While the leader of the assailant knows, he got the naked man by fishing illegally and asks to hand him over. On the other hand, the white-haired man knows if he hands this naked man, he will lose his lord, Anderson, as well. If he loses her, he will become a lost one and turn into a monster wandering the Forbidden Zone. But what scares him the most is the thought of losing his god, Anderson, because she is the only god who rescued him from the abyss. The white-haired man puts Jaehwan down and stands between them, intending to protect the naked man from the assailant. Well, how weak the white-haired man is shown when one of the assailants kicks him down and steps on him. Having his scythe on the white-haired man intimidates him to make sure he changes his mind. The white-haired man can only plead for his life before the scythe on his neck is flying off to the side. As it turns out, the assailant's hand is severed in that instance. The attack that came for him is so fast that he can't see and fails to realize the naked man is waking up. The moment he is aware of his surroundings, Jaehwan grumbles at the fact that at least he started off with some rags and chaos. But here he is completely naked. The assailant tries to order his men to kill the naked man. Yet, before he finishes his words, Jaehwan's sword already went through him, disintegrating half of his body. Dealing with his follower proves to be easy for Jaehwan since he has his power as an awakened. On the other hand, the white-haired man is in awe looking at the naked man. He remembers when he talked with Anderson, she told a story about one of the ancient gods, a real beast. They are violent and merciless, while he also really hates wearing clothes. He refuses to let anyone wear clothes in his presence. People tried to run away from him, clutching their clothes, and whenever he appeared, they cried in horror that the naked god had come. The white-haired man concludes that this particular god is simply a pervert, so Anderson explains further that it's more complicated than that, because he had his own philosophy. He felt that clothes were a burdensome form of hypocrisy and pretension. What really matters about a person begins revealing itself only after everything else has been stripped away. With his bare ass, Jaehwan approaches the white-haired man, asking whether he is Anderson's believer. Jaehwan hits the side of his head, asking the only believer Anderson has to get her out of his head, that instead confusing the white-haired man. Right after, Jaehwan is using suspicion to see that his world force takes the form of a setting. A strength boost from the circumstance where he is stripped power of his world setting. Anderson nags him from inside his world to say that he is not simply stripped, but wholly naked. On the other hand, Jaehwan uses his power to scan his surroundings to find no mana present at all. He realizes this place is a completely different world from chaos, ignoring the voice Anderson makes in his head. It is then explained that in chaos, one receives mana and uses it to activate skills. In the abyss, on the other hand, one can only produce power by means of the latent world force within one's spirit. Jaehwan learned that in Malark's record, but experiencing it himself is a completely different feeling. Right after, the white-haired man asks Jaehwan to accept him as his believer, as he believes that Jaehwan is the naked god and feels confident that his Lord Anderson will allow it. But Jaehwan refuses him, claiming that he is not his god while Anderson is still nagging Jaehwan in his head, saying that her believer, Leonard, is betraying her and tells Jaehwan not to accept it. Having enough out of it, Jaehwan uses the power of his world to intimidate them and tells them to be quiet. That scares Leonard's brain out, as Jaehwan tells them to start with the basics. If the great realm belongs to the masters, then the abyss is the gods' territory. The difference between them is that the gods of the abyss are much more careful about managing their territory than the masters of the great realm. The gods refer to their territory as sites. Sites range in size from large ones that belong to the elite gods who rule the abyss, down to the village-sized smaller sites that belong to mid-level or lower gods. Jaehwan thought that these sites were basically pieces of land. Leonard explains that are kind of alike, but they're a bit different. Sites are more or less just pieces of land to mid-level and lower gods, but to the high-level gods, they are like holy ground, because high-level gods can materialize their unique world using sites. To them, the sites themselves are essentially weapons. Jaehwan then assumes that maybe chaos is like one big site to catastrophe, and that means there are probably gods like catastrophe here with almost unlimited power. Leonard continues to explain that even high-level gods have a hard time exercising their world force throughout the whole site, so most gods use something called settings. That is the reason why Jaehwan is naked right now, because it's kind of a setting. When he is done explaining things, Leonard asks whether Jaehwan will kill his lord, Anderson. That makes Jaehwan understand that Leonard is following him because he doesn't want to lose his god, as Anderson also wonders whether Jaehwan will kill her. Since she has been consumed by his unique world, she could be wiped out at any moment. She saw this coming, and she could sense it as soon as she entered him. She also can't believe he is the one behind that notorious master massacre. On the other hand, Jaehwan also saw her memories when he absorbed her. Her memories are when she put all of her savings into buying a tower from a shady merchant. Using the tower, she bought to destroy the world to get products she can sell of use to her believers. So Jaehwan confronts her, the being he hates the most the moment he climbs the tower. Just like the silly cat he killed back then, Anderson is also a cultivator. Jaehwan wonders why she would do something like that, but Anderson can only plead that she lost her memories when she became God. Clenching his fist, Jaehwan knows from the Malark records that supreme beings like angels and demons were said to be born only to become cultivators. Maybe people like Anderson never had a choice in the first place, but he still can't forgive for what she did. In the end, Anderson pleads to Jaehwan that he can kill her, but she wishes he accept Leonard as his believer. This is new for Jaehwan, a former cultivator worrying about someone else. Anderson explains the relationship between her and Leonard, who wants a product, is different from what Jaehwan might think. She may have been created for a particular reason, but her emotions are her own. That is why she cares about her believer. Suddenly, Leonard is coughing and is surprised to know that he is bleeding out of nowhere. Right after, his veins swell up, terrifying and confusing him as to what happened to his body. As he screams, losing his mind, Anderson knows that it is because he is turning into a lost one. Jaehwan remembers the factory managers. They called themselves Lost Ones as well, because they lost their god, Deus. But aside from a very small number that maintains reason like ENIAC, they said most people who lose their god fall into despair and become mindless monsters. So Jaehwan needs to do something about Leonard, as Anderson begs him to save her believer. Just like him, Leonard was once a human being, which startled Jaehwan for a bit, wondering if he still had the right to call himself human. Deciding to help Leonard, Jaehwan asks what he needs to do. So Anderson explains he just needs to accept Leonard as his believer. Before he does it, he asks what will he receive in return. So Anderson is going to let herself be erased permanently from Jaehwan's mind. That instant, Jaehwan takes up his sword to muster up his strength and accepts Leonard as one of his believers. Before long, Leonard wakes up confused. All he knows is he passed out in the middle of Caspian, but what welcomes him is a different world. Believers see the world through their God's worldview. Depending on how God views the world, believers are forced to accept their perspective. Anderson's worldview is like a fairy tale, so he assumes this is Jaehwan's world. True to his assumption, What welcomes him is the hellish world Jaehwan perceives, with the giant moon-sized eyeball overseeing the whole wide world. That instant, Leonard is screaming out of his mind to see the new god he worships right now is lunatic. Well, Jaehwan witness his first believer is out like a light as Anderson wonders what kind of world he showed to Leonard. This makes Jaehwan remember what's Sam and Garam when he said that Jaehwan's world won't be very popular in the Abyss. In the end, Jaehwan blames Leonard for becoming his believer when he shows him a giant eye, crows, and a bunch of dead bodies. So Jaehwan carries him to go, as he changes his mind about Anderson, telling her that now she needs to prove herself worthy for him to keep alive. As they walk to the city, Anderson promises to prove her worth to him. Before long, they arrive in front of the 84th entry gate of Caspian. On the other hand, people are startled to see a naked man walking brazenly. While Jaehwan is wondering whether it is okay for him to be like this, Leonard explains that the Abyss respects all personal settings. Jaehwan feels thankful that Carlton Javier is not here to nag him right now, because here, gods and humans have different standards with things in chaos. If what Jaehwan does is considered usual, one thing for certain is that this place is clearly unusual. Looking at the gate in front of him, Jaehwan is smiling enthusiastically. Yet, Jaehwan is arrested the moment he requests entry with his, but naked. The officer doesn't believe there is such a setting where one would become stronger when one is naked. He asks why can't he just keep it with himself in his unique world, instead of running around while naked. Jaehwan is mad. His mind is set to kill Anderson right away, but she claims that his setting is totally normal as she already registered the setting. Right after, another officer came forward to say that it was true the setting had been registered 2,531 years ago. Apparently, according to the record, it was a high-level god, hence Anderson claims that was a long time ago, and now she is nobody. At this point, Jaehwan requests entry claiming to be Anderson, the Naked's agent. With that in mind, Jaehwan immediately requests the officers to let him go. That in turn annoys the officers. Whispering, Leonard explains there is a strict hierarchy among believers. The immigration officers are the believers of a high-level god, so he urges Jaehwan to be a bit more respectful toward them. But classic Jaehwan doesn't care for such a thing, terrifying his newly acquired believer into pissing his pants, as he begs Jaehwan to handle the immigration request. Once they finish with it, they are finally able to enter the city, while Leonard is crying after being so exhausted answering the officer's question. Jaehwan praises him for getting them in. Leonard has a real gift for words, and Jaehwan likes him much better than a certain useless someone he remembers. Right after, Anderson explains that they went in because of her. Unlike her, Jaehwan is an illegal god. If not for her, he would be jailed the moment he requested an entry. She then explains that gods from the Abyss refer to gods like Jaehwan who haven't been registered in Big Brother's Akashic records. Usually, people are registered automatically when they obtain divine rights, but Jaehwan is a different case, and Big Brother's factions would never acknowledge someone like Jaehwan as a god. As they go deeper, Jaehwan sees people are screaming at someone who tied up. Leonard explains those tied people are newly captured spirits from a fishing spot, and he assumes they are being taken to a temporary prison before being put up at auction. Anderson chips in, saying the newly captured spirits degenerate into monsters very quickly unless they find a god to worship. Most of the time, they are spirits from peripheral worlds of the Tree of Illusion, but once in a while, there will be souls that died in a nightmare tower among them. As Anderson explains those things, Jaehwan sees a familiar presence among the tied-up people. Leonard is confused, looking at his new lord as staggering in place. That instant, Jaehwan remembers what happened 900 years ago, a long-gone friend he called Kim Yunwan. He is wondering what the heck he is doing right here, as he is looking toward the supposedly long-gone friend he once had.